I wanted to destroy him. I really did. This pious, quiet man with his hypocritical smile triggered everything I hated in my own life. So I did the unforgivable. I made Islam my tool of revenge, but in the end, I found peace in myself. My name is Thomas. I'm 42 years old, married with 2 children, and a software developer in Munich. Basically, it's a completely normal German life. Work, family, a single family home. But when my mother needed care and I took her in, everything changed. At first, it was just stressful. I'd come home late from work. The kids would scream. My wife was overwhelmed. My mother, just a mother, proud, stubborn, and full of accusations. You used to be different, Thomas. You were warm. What happened to you? She'd say often. I hated the way he looked at me, his silent suffering. I pushed him into the guest room, mostly leaving him alone. I made excuses, saying I was working, but really, I couldn't stand him. One day, I lost my temper. After arguing with my wife about my mother, I shouted, "Then I'll put her in a nursing home. Enough is enough." That same evening, I started looking for an affordable nursing home. And then there was him, Yunus, my neighbor, younger than me, maybe in his late 30s. Always friendly, always helpful, always kind, bearded. He prayed regularly in the garden overlooking Mecca and looked lovingly at his mother. He was in a wheelchair, yet I would often see him laughing on the balcony as Yunus brought him tea or watered his favorite flowers. And then something triggered everything inside me. My mother had fallen alone in the garden, and I was at work. When I got home, Yunus was sitting in the living room, well-groomed and warm. He had called emergency services, made her tea, and calmed her down. "Thomas, your mother needs more attention," he said calmly, without accusation, without arrogance. But in every word I heard, "You are a failure. You are a bad son. You're not a person with a heart." I smiled coldly, and from that moment on, I realized I hate him. I started observing him. At first, just casually, noticing when he left the house, when he returned, who he spoke to. He was almost stereotypically good, friendly to his neighbors, always smiling, never loud, never rude. And it infuriated me. Who is this man? What is he really hiding? I spent my evenings researching Islam on internet forums. At first, I was looking for ammunition, something shameful, something I could use to expose him. Maybe he was an extremist, after all, or he had something to hide. Maybe he was secretly preaching, radicalizing young people, or organizing illegal gatherings. I wanted to find something, but instead, I found peace. Surah al-Falaq, Surah al-Ikhlas. Words I'd never heard before captivated me, not because I believed them, but because they felt like answers. Calm, quiet, honest answers to questions I didn't dare ask myself. I lied to my wife. I told her I was working on a new project. Instead, I read hadiths, watched YouTube videos about prayer rituals and prophetic stories. The more I read, the more I hated myself. I wanted revenge. I wanted Yunus to feel bad, to waver his faith, but I hesitated. My wife didn't notice. She was too busy with the kids. Or herself. Our marriage had already become a marriage of convenience. But then I made a mistake. I confronted Yunus directly. "Tell me?" I began, nonchalantly as I took out the trash. "What are women like in Islam? Do they really have to obey?" It was a trap. I wanted him to freak out, to give himself away. But he just smiled. "This is a huge responsibility for both of us. Thomas, it's not obedience in the sense of submission. It's trust. I'd be happy to show you something about it if you'd like." I couldn't speak. There was no anger, no pun intended, just understanding. I couldn't sleep that night. I was sitting in the kitchen, my mother coughing in the next room. I went to her for the first time in months, gave her some tea, and tucked her into bed. "What's wrong with you?" she asked quietly. I didn't know. 2 days later, I suddenly found myself in the living room with the Quran. My wife walked in, and what happened next changed everything. My wife froze at the door. Her gaze fell on the book in my hand, the German translation of the Quran. I tried to hide it, but it was too late. "What are you doing, Thomas?" Her voice was calm but cold. It was like the calm before the storm. I shrugged. I'm just reading. I'm interested in other cultures. Religions. You know, other cultures? Are you turning to spirituality now? Or what? Don't tell me you want to be a Muslim. He laughed. That mocking, hurtful laughter, which had never bothered me before, now slapped me across the face. I remained silent. "Are you serious, Thomas?" he continued. You didn't even make it through last Christmas, and now you want to pray, fast, and kneel on the carpet 5 times a day? I put the book down, gently, where, respectfully. Maybe I'm tired of our current lifestyle. Maybe I'll find something I missed there. What's missing is your spine, he grumbled and left the room. I was numb. I sat on the couch for hours while the kids slept upstairs and my wife stayed in the guest room. I heard a knock on my door in the middle of the night. My mother. Thomas, did you really read? She whispered. I nodded. She sat down next to me. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her gaze was gentle. Your father said something similar once. When he was sick, he said we Germans had too much noise and too little meaning in life. I laughed at him then. Now, I know what you mean. I didn't understand what she meant. She took my hand. If it brings you peace, keep reading. But remember, peace begins here. She placed my hand on her chest. This was the first time I'd spoken to my mother like this since childhood. The next morning, everything happened quickly. My wife was calm but active. Breakfast, the kids, the door closed. I didn't say a word from the night before. I went to Eunice. I just stood there in front of his door. He opened the door and looked at me questioningly. I simply said, I want to understand, but properly. No ostentation, no pressure. Just understand. He nodded. Then come in, brother. I never imagined that the man I want to destroy would open the door to a life I had never sought, but probably needed. But there was something I didn't yet know. My greatest test was still ahead of me, and it came from my own family. I started seeing Eunice regularly. At first, we chatted once a week. Then I read surahs, hadiths, and stories of prophets with him. I asked him thousands of questions. He answered them all patiently, without pressure. And what surprised me most was, I felt seen, not judged, not devalued, just accepted. But the tension at home grew. My wife was distant. Conversations became shorter. Her gaze was suspicious. One evening, after dinner, she blurted out, Okay, finally tell me, do you want to become a Muslim, yes or no? I didn't hesitate. I'm thinking about it, yes. She looked at me for a few seconds. Then she stood up and said simply, Then you're no longer the man I married. I fell asleep on the couch. Not because she wanted to, because I knew she was right. I was changing, but for the first time in my life, I felt good. A few days later, I went for a walk with my mother. She was weak but persistent. As we sat on a bench, she suddenly asked, Thomas, do you really want to become a Muslim? I nodded. She sighed deeply. I wasn't any better before. I used to rave about Muslims without even knowing them. I was narrow-minded. I was surprised. And now, she looked at me. Now I see my son smiling more than I've seen him smile in years. And that's enough for me. I felt tears in my eyes, but also uneasiness, because my wife wasn't so open. 2 weeks later, I prayed for the first time. Still awkward, silent, alone in my office. I bowed. I knelt. I said softly, Allahu Akbar, and then silence, but not emptiness, rather fullness, warmth. I told Eunice. He hugged me, and he said, You're on the path, but the path will test you. He was right, because that same night, my wife found my prayer rug. She yelled at me. She called me a member of a cult, a worshiper of God, a child molester. And worst of all, she told me out loud, in front of our children, that if I continued to behave this way, I would no longer be part of this family. I had expected so much, rejection, ridicule, even loneliness, but not that I would lose my own family, to finally be myself. And then the letter arrived, from my mother, handwritten, and with a sentence that questioned everything. The letter was on my pillow, a simple envelope. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother. I opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Thomas, I don't know how much time I have left, but I want you to read this for me before it's too late. I've never been an easy mother. I've often been too harsh on you, given too little praise and expected too much. I'm sorry. I've made mistakes. Many, even in my relationships with religion. I've judged people I didn't know. I've been upset by things I didn't understand. Seeing you change, I was afraid at first. But then I realized you found something I never had. Peace, tranquility, hope. If Islam gives you these things, then I thank God, or as you say now, Allah. I'm proud of you, not because you're Muslim, but because you have the courage to follow your heart. Live your life, not mine. And forgive me if I say this too late. I love you just the way you are. Your mother. I sat there for a long time, the letter in my hand, the tears on the paper. My wife walked in. She was standing at the door. She saw me crying. "What happened?" she asked almost silently. I showed her the letter. She read it, silently. Then she simply said, "What now? You want to be baptized, or what they call it there?" I looked at her. The martyrdom. And yes, I want to talk to her. The night was quiet. There was no arguing, no noise, just distance. The next morning, she packed a bag for herself and the children. We're going to my sister's house. For a while, I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I knew if I stopped her now, I'd lose myself again. She left the house. She didn't even blow a kiss. She didn't even look back. I stood at the window, watching them go. Then I called Eunice. "I'm ready." 2 days later, I recited the martyrdom at the small mosque nearby. I testify that there is no God but Allah, and I testify that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. I wasn't alone. Eunice was there, and surprisingly, my mother was there too. She was weak in a wheelchair, but she was there, with tears in her eyes. He simply said, "You finally arrived." I had lost everything, my marriage, my home, my familiar world. But for the first time, I had found myself. But my journey wasn't over yet, because what had begun as revenge was now about to learn to forgive, and fate had already prepared the next step for me. 2 weeks after my martyrdom, the house was quiet. There were no children's voices, no clinking of dishes, no arguments, only the humming of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. I often woke up early. I prayed the morning prayer. Then I went for long walks. That worked, against the emptiness, against the fear, against the longing. Eunice was my pillar of strength. He invited me to his house. We drank tea. We talked about patience, forgiveness, and the coming of time. One evening, he suddenly said, "Do you know why I'm so calm, Thomas? Why don't I ever respond to provocations?" I nodded. He smiled weakly. "Because I wasn't like this before. I was angry. I was violent. I did things I'm not proud of. Islam didn't just change me, it saved me." I was shocked. I'd always thought of him as a perfect person. And now this? "So what changed you?" "Loss," he said quietly. "My wife, my son, an accident. I was drunk. I lost her, and God still forgave me. How could I judge others?" I didn't know what to say. But something exploded inside me. For the first time, I understood we all have wounds. Some visible, some hidden. My wife called the next morning, unusually early. Her voice was strained. "Thomas, can we talk?" Without arguing. I agreed. She arrived that afternoon, childless. "I've been thinking. I was wrong. Yes, you've changed, but you're not a stranger. Maybe you're better than ever." I remained silent. "The kids miss you." "Me too. But I don't know if I can live with your faith." I shook my head. "I don't expect you to become a Muslim. Just accept me as I am." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "I need time, but you're their father, and they need you too." For the next few weeks, I saw my kids regularly again. We went to the park. I told stories. Food, crafts, Lego. No religion. Just love, closeness, trust. And then out of the blue, my wife arrived one Friday evening. The kids asked if they could spend the night at your place. I said yes. I was speechless. He looked me in the eye. "You're not the man I married anymore. But maybe you're the father they've always needed." I thought Islam would destroy everything I had, but it only took what had belonged to me, my masks, my lies, my anger, and what remained was peace. But one final question remained. Can I truly forgive myself for what I began with hatred? Ramadan arrived, my first Ramadan. I fasted not just from food, but from anger, pain, old thoughts. Eunice invited me to iftar almost every evening. His mother, a petite, elderly woman with warm eyes, always set the table carefully. At one point, I quietly called her Andy. She laughed, and she said, "Then you're my son now." A few days later, that evening, after dinner, she held my hand. "You used to think badly of us, didn't you?" I swallowed. I looked at her. "Yes." "And now you love us." I nodded. "Then you know better or worse than us. You're just human." I cried, silently, deep inside, because I knew she was right. My mother grew weaker. Her hands shook more. Her voice would often break. But she insisted I read the Quran to me in German during evening prayers. She listened as if it were her last story. "When I'm gone," she whispered one evening, "I want you to stand up for what you believe in, even if you're alone." 3 days later, she died. in my arms, peaceful, smiling. I washed her body myself, with Eunice's help, not because she was Muslim, but because she was my mother, and because I finally understood respect and love need no religion, only humanity. After the funeral, my wife came to me. She took my hand. I was there when you washed him. I saw it. I nodded. It was so beautiful. It was dignified. She took a deep breath. Maybe I don't understand everything you did, but I see who you are, and I want our children to see that too. I couldn't say anything. I just held her hand. That evening, alone in my room, I thought, my fantasies of revenge, my anger, my fear of being weak. I had chosen Islam as a weapon, and it disarmed me. I wanted to hate him, Eunice, but he became my brother. I wanted to lose my faith, but for the first time, I found it. One thing was missing, to completely forgive myself, because the last enemy I had yet to face was my old self. A month had passed. Ramadan was over. My children spent every weekend with me. My wife, or rather my ex-wife, had established a calm and respectful relationship. No more arguments. No more blame. A quiet understanding. Sometimes something has to break for something real to emerge. I went back to work. Fewer hours, more mindfulness. And I prayed 5 times a day. Not out of duty, but out of gratitude. But something wouldn't let me rest. One morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I looked at myself. Not at the beard. Not at my forehead, with its faint prayer marks. Not at the dark circles under my eyes. I saw the old Thomas. The Thomas filled with anger. The Thomas who hated a helpful neighbor because he was so empty. The Thomas who wanted to deport his mother. The Thomas who didn't understand Islam and despised her for it. I said out loud, I forgive you for everything. It felt strange at first, then honest, then necessary. Later that day, I ran into Eunice in the park. I forgave someone today, I said. He looked at me and smiled. Who? Me? He put his hand on my shoulder. Then you understand, brother. A few weeks later, I was asked to speak at a mosque launch. My first reaction was no. I wasn't a scholar. I wasn't a model Muslim. But then I remembered old Thomas, and everyone who might have once been searching like me. I approached a small audience, people from the neighborhood, skeptical faces, a familiar uncertainty. I said, I wanted to harm a Muslim. I tried to mock his faith. I thought I was better. But what I found wasn't an enemy, it was a mirror. And that mirror showed me that I was the one who was lost. Silence. Then applause. Not thunderous applause, but honest applause. That evening, I wrote in my notebook. I came with hatred. I stayed with curiosity. I was transformed by pain. And I stayed for peace. What began as revenge ended in salvation. And the man I wanted to destroy helped me save my life.